Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is the final video on my 3-part mini-series on panic and anxiety disorders. The first video I talked about what the difference is between a panic and anxiety disorder, and the second part I talked about how I got my panic and anxiety disorder, and the third part is me talking about how I found the best ways to manage panic and anxiety disorders. So without further ado, let's get started. So when I first started getting panic and anxiety, I would do what most people would probably do. They would try to find somebody they could relate to, because most people around you cannot. Like when I was going through it, nobody in my life had ever experienced panic. Maybe a little bit of anxiety, but not to the extent that I was feeling it. So what I did was I would go online and find people who are going through similar things as me, because I didn't want to feel alone. At first it was really comforting to know that there were people out there who knew exactly what I was going through. It made me feel less alone. But the problem was everybody knew exactly what I was going through, but nobody knew how to manage it or how to get through it. I remember there was one point where something clicked with me when one day I was reading one of the forums. I was reading somebody's post about their panic and anxiety, and at the time my panic attack was at its peak. Like, it was bad. I was getting 5 to 6 times. I was barely sleeping an hour or 2 a day. Like, I was going insane. All these people that were on the forums, my heart went out to them, and I knew exactly what they were going through, but I didn't want to be stuck in this peak panic and anxiety state for the rest of my life. So I was like, okay, I gotta figure out a way to get through this. I gotta figure out a way to manage this. Another thing was anytime I went to the doctors to get my panic attack checked, or at the time I thought it was a heart attack, but it was actually a panic attack, when I'd go to the emergency room, the first thing the doctors would do would prescribe me Xanax or some kind of antidepressant medication. Now, I'm not against medication. I believe that there is a time and place and definitely needed in certain situations. But I feel like our society today is overly medicated or overly relies on medication to get through the day. I am not a medical doctor. I don't claim to know anything about medicine. This is just my point of view and what I've experienced. So my mom was a pharmacist, and my dad took a lot of medication, like prescription medication, for his heart problems, his cholesterol, his high blood pressure, his diabetes, his sleep problems because he couldn't sleep really well, and his anxiety, his panic. He was on a concoction of medication. And then on top of that, they would have different medications to neutralize the side effects from all the other medication he was taking. So literally morning and night, he would have a handful of pills in his hand. Like, that was his breakfast and dinner. And growing up, seeing my dad on all these prescription medications and hearing my mom's stories about side effects from certain medication, because she always told me the side effects, I knew that things like Xanax and Prozac were basically a band-aid. Like, it does help in those situations when with your anxiety, and it numbs you, but it doesn't fix the issue. It doesn't fix the core issue. When I first started having panic attacks and anxiety attacks, like, I did take Xanax. I took the lowest dose of Xanax possible, and I took the lowest dose of antidepressant possible, and it helped. But I didn't want to end up like my dad. I didn't want to end up taking handfuls of pills like he did for every problem in the book. So I went on a mission to figure out a way to learn to manage my anxiety and panic disorder without relying so heavily on medication. So the most common advice that people are going to share online are meditate, learn some good breathing techniques, get enough sleep, get enough exercise. All those things, 100% very useful, and I highly recommend it. But there are things that most people don't talk about that really helped me, and those are the things that I want to share today. Surround yourself with positive people. One of the hardest things to do when I first started getting my panic attack is being around people who are passionate, who are ambitious, who are happy. That was really hard because I'm in a state, right, where I'm super depressed. I'm terrified for my life. Like, I'm constantly feeling like I'm gonna die. And then I got people around me that are like, life's great, everything's fine. That was hard to be around, because in that moment, I don't want to hear about anybody's happiness. I'm busy being sad and busy being hurt and busy being terrified, and you might have rainbows and sunshines coming out of your ass, but I'm literally in a black hole. And that was rough, especially because a lot of people around me didn't understand exactly what I was going through. But I have to tell you that being around those people, as hard as it was in the beginning, their energy was infectious. I feel that we are the product of our surroundings, whether we want to admit it or not. So when you're going through a really bad bout of anxiety and panic and you are emotionally vulnerable, putting yourself in an environment where other people are just as down and negative and low as you start to match their frequency. On the other hand, my friends were very positive. They were very encouraging. And being around that, like at first, they're over here in their frequency level and I'm still down here. But eventually, I started noticing that I would slowly match their frequency level. Now, this took time. This really did. This was about 5 or 6 months of me just being right here, maybe jumping up a little and coming back down in frequency, but eventually, slowly, I started to match their frequency. And it wasn't just my friends or family around me. I also started to seek out videos on YouTube and audiobooks and music that were on a high frequency as far as energy goes. There's a lot of people out there that are like, I don't have a lot of friends that are, at a high frequency level when it comes to their emotions. Well, what I would recommend you do is you listen to people who are at that level. The people that I listen to are people like Tony Robbins, Kyle Cease. Sometimes I listen to Gary Vee. One of my favorites was Dr. Wayne Dyer. Like, I listen to their audiobooks, I listen to their YouTube channel, I listen to their podcasts. At first, like I keep saying, it doesn't sink in because you're guarded, you're in a hole, all you're thinking about is yourself. I can guarantee you, eventually you're going to hear those words. Their messages are going to sink in, and just surrounding yourself in that powerful, positive energy makes a really, really big difference when you are in your darkest moments. One thing that really helped me, and I kind of mentioned this in number 1, but number 1 is more about surrounding yourself, whether online through YouTube or podcasts, or people around you with positive people with positive frequencies. Number 2 is reading self-help books. Now, I know a lot of people are out there like, really, seriously, self-help books? I'm telling you, it makes a difference. There are so many people out there who have gone from worse situations that most people can't even imagine. Reading about people who have been in really bad situations and figuring out ways to overcome them was really encouraging for me to hear, because I felt like, okay, if they can get through that, then so can I. And reading their tips of what they've learned and them sharing their knowledge with me and me trying them out, like, it gave me hope. And that hope was everything. So yeah, self-help books, just like in the name itself, are literally self-help. They will help you a lot. I will list down below some of the books that really, really helped me. So this next tip, I guess, is something that a lot of people fight with me on, and it's stop watching the news. So the way the news makes money is based off of how many people tune into the news. And how they get people to watch the news is to show them as much bad stuff going on as possible, because for some reason as a society we take to chaos like flies to honey. And then when you inundate yourself with that kind of like negative news stories, like, oh, somebody down the neighborhood got shot, there was a huge fire that killed millions of people, or there was a plane crash that killed hundreds of people, and you're just inundated with just news about death and destruction and chaos, it will get to your psyche. I guarantee it. I cannot tell you how many times I've sit through like my mom or my aunt or even Matt's grandparents who sit and watch the news like 24 hours a day. And when you hear them talk, it's like, oh, the world is terrible. Oh, the world is scary. Oh, it creates a lot of anxiety. We start focusing our energy on all the bad instead of all the good in the world. And it makes us anxious, it makes us depressed, it makes us angry, it makes us frustrated. Especially for people with panic and anxiety disorder, we don't need to add any more anxiety. We don't need to add any more chaos or destruction in our life. What we should be doing is focusing on the good, the things that make this world beautiful, because we already have the chaos inside of us. We already have the darkness inside of us. Adding any more to that would just break us. So this was actually something really hard for me to do, because I used to read the news all the time. Every single morning, the first thing I do when I wake up, I would go into yahoo.com and I would read through all the news articles. Somebody died, a celebrity died, some child got abducted, later found dead. There was a car crash with a couple. This couple went to Bali and ended up eating something and died on their honeymoon. Like, that's how I started my day. And imagine, how can I be happy? How can I feel good when I'm inundating myself with terrible news? People will argue with me that, well, you need to know what's going on in the world. Do you really? By knowing that information, by knowing that somebody in Bali died from eating something that wasn't cooked properly, like, how is that helping you and how is that helping them? Especially being an empath, that really, really affects me. And so I don't read the news anymore. If there was an earthquake or some kind of tragedy that happened, I will find out. People will tell me, and in that moment I can decide if there's anything I can do to help. When I started getting panic and anxiety, one of the first things that I cut out was negative media. Now I'm not saying that as in news, like, this is the next step. I got away from social media. So I disconnected from social media because I found that I was comparing myself to other people on my social media. And it ended up becoming a distraction because I wasn't focusing on how I can get better and become a better human being. I found myself being more envious and being jealous of how everybody else was living their lives. And that just wasn't a healthy way to live my life, just to be sitting there envious and jealous over my friends' successes and what they were doing in their lives, and it just wasn't healthy. Another thing I did was I cut out any type of entertainment, whether it be books or music or movies that had a negative message. I stuck to a lot of comedies because there is nothing in the world that is powerful as laughter. So when I'm sad and depressed, even if I don't feel like it, I'll throw on a comedy and I will laugh. And at first I have to force myself to laugh, but by the end of it, I am genuinely laughing with a smile on my face and I'm feeling really good. And another thing I did was I filtered out a lot of my music. When you're depressed, you love listening to depressing music because you feel like the music understands you. But just like surrounding yourself with people who are going through the same things as you and feeling the same emotions, it's nice because it's comforting, but it's not helpful. It comes down to surrounding yourself with positive messages. And again, it sucked at first, but the more I did it, the more I started feeling good, the more hope started to build up inside of me. If I couldn't find positive music, I would find positive podcasts. If I couldn't find anything funny or positive to watch, I would watch positive motivational speeches on YouTube. I literally went out of my way to try to cut out as much negative influence I had in my life through all media platforms and just focus on things that made me happy, that made me laugh, that gave me hope, and that made me feel good. The last and most important thing that I could share with that really helped me get through my panic disorder was push yourself out of your comfort zone. When I was first having my panic and anxiety symptoms, I was a hermit. I couldn't leave the house without freaking out. I was afraid that if I left the house that I was gonna die. But at the same time, it didn't matter because I felt that way in the house too. But for some reason, I was afraid that if I went to the grocery store by myself, I would have a heart attack and die in the middle of the bread aisle and nobody know who I was and my family would never figure out what happened to me. Those were the thoughts that went through my mind. So I never left the house for a good 3 or 4 months. I think about those moments now and it's rough because I was so terrified of everything. And since then, I backpacked Asia for 8 months and it took baby steps. The first thing that I did was I had to learn to go to the bathroom by myself, to stay in the shower by myself, because what I used to do was anytime I took a shower or I went to the bathroom, I would have Matt wait right next to me because I was afraid to do it myself. I couldn't even go to the bathroom by myself. How was I gonna ever leave the house by myself? Like, it was really bad. But the only way I got through that was I forced myself and put myself into situations slowly. I didn't like just do it cold turkey. Like, I eased myself into it, but I did it. I would take baby steps. I would first start by going to the bathroom by myself, taking a shower by myself. It was scary, definitely for the first few times, but after a few times I was like, okay, I got this. And then it was staying at home while Matt ran errands. I learned to take a step outside, stand there as long as I could before my panic attack set in. And like, I would just keep pushing myself and pushing myself and pushing myself until eventually I was walking down the street, until I was eventually walking around the block, until eventually I was driving my car down to Walgreens, until eventually going to restaurants and sitting by myself and then ordering water before I had a panic attack and I had to turn home. I kept pushing and pushing myself against my comfort zone until it started to expand and expand and expand and expand until I was traveling Southeast Asia with a backpack. Going from that to having traveled the world to making YouTube videos. In fact, this is another comfort zone push for me. None of the things that I gave you today is easy advice. I don't believe in just your panic and anxiety just going away like that. Even to this day, 4 or 5 years later, I still have moments where I go into panic attack mode. I still have anxiety, but I manage it. And a lot of the things that helped me do it are like the meditating and the exercising and the eating healthy, like cutting out the processed food, cutting out sugar, and doing the 5 tips that I gave you today. It made a huge difference. It made a huge difference in my anxiety. It made a huge difference in my panic. It also made a huge difference in how I feel about myself. Anyways, I'm gonna go because this video is getting really long and I have something very important this evening that I have to get to, so I won't be able to edit tonight, so I gotta start editing this right now. So if you guys have any comments or questions or anything, feel free to leave them down below. I promise I will read them and I will message you back. If you have any tips yourself that you want to share to other people in the comment section, feel free to leave the comment below. Or if you don't want it to be public in the comment section, feel free to DM me at my Instagram at Zakimi. I'll also reply to you there too. So thank you guys so much for watching the series. It definitely meant a lot to me. Hopefully some of this information was very helpful to you, and thank you so much for staying tuned in. Awesome. All right, I love you guys so much, and all of you who are going through panic and anxiety, like, I get it. I've been there. There was definitely a lot of times where I felt like I had to go through this alone, and you're not alone. So I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys tomorrow.